Am I the wrong person for asking my girlfriend to give up the job of her dreams because of her ex? When my girlfriend, Kiara, told me she had received an offer for the job of her dreams, I should have felt nothing but pride for her. After all the years of hard work, sacrifices, and late nights, she was about to land the position she'd always wanted. For a brief moment, I did feel that pride. I saw her eyes light up with excitement, and for a heartbeat, everything felt perfect. But that feeling didn't last long. Just when I thought everything was going to be fine, Kiara dropped a bombshell that wiped the smile off my face. The job she was so thrilled about? It turned out that Andrea, her ex, worked there too. Instantly, the shine of her achievement seemed to dull, overshadowed by something I couldn't ignore, something that gnawed at me from the inside. Andrea wasn't just any ex. No, he was the ex, the one she had described years ago as her almost perfect. Listening to her talk about him, it seemed like the only thing that had ever come between them was bad timing, not a lack of feelings. It was clear they shared something deep, and that thought alone sent waves of insecurity crashing through me. Now, the thought of them working together side by side every day was like a seed planted in my mind, growing with every passing second. Could I really let go of my doubts? Could I simply accept that Andrea, a man who had once held a very special place in her heart, would now be part of her daily life in such an intimate way? I tried my best to mask my growing discomfort. I didn't want to seem insecure, jealous, or worse, controlling. Who wants to be that partner? But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. While Kiara was excitedly discussing all the wonderful opportunities the new job would bring, my mind was spiraling. The more she spoke about it, the more my thoughts raced. I kept asking myself, was Andrea really just an ex, a chapter closed in the past? Or was there something more there, something I was overlooking? The evening stretched on, and I fought with myself, telling myself to calm down. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that this was just a job, a career opportunity, nothing more. After all, people have exes, right? They're part of our past, a chapter we close and move on from. So why couldn't I let go of this? Why couldn't I push aside this gnawing feeling in my gut? But no matter how many times I tried to convince myself I was overreacting, I couldn't escape the nagging sense that there was more to this situation than I was willing to admit. What if Andrea and Kiara had an unspoken bond, one that went deeper than mere friendship? What if working so closely together would bring old feelings to the surface? I could feel myself becoming more and more frustrated, torn between wanting to support her and protect our relationship, and the fear of what might unfold between them. It wasn't just about Andrea being an ex. It was about who he was to her. He was a significant part of her past, someone who had left a lasting impression. And those words she had once used to describe him, words like almost perfect and the one who got away, they kept echoing in my head, stirring up feelings of insecurity I hadn't anticipated. But I didn't want to start a confrontation over something I wasn't even sure of. I didn't want to ruin the moment. This was her dream job, something she had worked so hard for. I knew that. And yet, the thought of them being in each other's daily lives again, of Andrea being such a significant figure in her world, made my stomach turn. I decided not to say anything immediately. I figured reacting impulsively would only complicate things further. But inside, the questions wouldn't stop. Was I just being insecure? Was I making a big deal out of nothing? Or was there something more that I was missing? Could I be asking too much by questioning her choices? But as the evening wore on and Kiara continued to share her excitement about the new job, I couldn't escape my growing unease. I tried to push the thoughts out of my head, tried to focus on her happiness. But how could I ignore the fact that Andrea's presence in her life was unavoidable? The more I thought about it, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to their relationship than I was ready to accept. Was I just being paranoid, or was my instinct telling me that something wasn't as simple as it seemed? The more I turned it over in my mind, the more I realized how deeply this situation was affecting me. I had never really considered how much of Kiara's past would continue to be part of her life, how intertwined her past relationships were with her present. I had always thought I was confident and secure in our relationship, but this new development, this situation with Andrea, had revealed parts of myself I hadn't fully acknowledged before. It made me question whether I was truly ready to let her go after her dreams, even if it meant facing the uncomfortable truth about her past. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know whether I should confront her with my fears or whether I should try to suppress them, convincing myself that everything was fine. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about Andrea. It was about trust, about facing my own insecurities, and ultimately about whether I could accept her past and her future without letting my fears control us. I realized I had a choice. Either I could trust her fully and completely and let her live her life, or I could allow my insecurities to drive a wedge between us. But how could I make that choice without sounding like the jealous, insecure partner I never wanted to be? And if I truly loved her, shouldn't I want what was best for her, even if it meant stepping aside and facing my own fears head-on? As I sat there, caught in my own thoughts, I knew this was only the beginning of a much bigger conversation, one I wasn't sure I was ready for. But one thing was clear. If I wanted to keep this relationship strong, I was going to have to let go of my fears, trust her more than I ever had, and accept that her dreams and her past were part of who she was. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the wrong person for asking her to choose between us, but I had to be sure. I had to be honest with myself first. And that's the hardest part, isn't it? Trusting ourselves enough to trust others, especially when they hold a piece of our hearts. The following week, Kiara signed the contract. She was radiant, glowing with excitement, and I did my best to hide my inner turmoil, not wanting to ruin her moment. As we sat down for dinner that evening, she eagerly told me about the exciting projects awaiting her in the new job. But inside I couldn't stop worrying. The decision to talk to her weighed heavily on me, but I knew I couldn't put it off any longer. I began cautiously, trying to maintain a calm tone. As I reminded her that Andrea worked there, her face showed no sign of concern. In fact, she smiled reassuringly, telling me that he was in a different department and that they probably wouldn't even cross paths. But instead of calming me, those words only irritated me more. Was she really so indifferent about it? Or was she underestimating the situation? I tried to mask my discomfort and asked her if she was sure that Andrea's presence wouldn't be a problem. Her reaction caught me off guard. Her smile faded instantly, replaced by a look of surprise, as though she didn't understand the point of my question. She responded simply, almost irritated by the suggestion, explaining that it was just a job and that Andrea no longer mattered. Yet despite her calm assurances, I couldn't shake what I felt inside. With my heart racing, I confessed that the whole situation bothered me. I couldn't pretend that Andrea's presence didn't matter, not after everything I knew about their history. Saying it out loud made me feel vulnerable, but also a little relieved, as if I were finally confronting a burden I'd been carrying inside. Kiara leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. Her expression shifted. No longer reassuring, but now rigid, almost defensive. She couldn't understand why I was bringing this up, and the fact that I was doing it at that moment seemed to irritate her even more. Her voice grew firm, almost sharp, as she asked if I was suggesting she should give up this opportunity. Her words stung because I knew she was interpreting the situation as an attack on her success, her independence. I tried to clarify, telling her that I wasn't asking her to give up the job, but that I wished she would consider other options. I struggled to keep my tone calm, but the tension between us was palpable. Kiara looked at me in silence for a moment before her face changed again. She wasn't surprised anymore, but deeply disappointed. Her voice quivered with emotion as she asked if I realized how hard she had worked to get to this point. The tone wasn't angry, but hurt, and that hurt me even more. She explained that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for her, and she wasn't about to let the past ruin everything she had worked for. By that point, the atmosphere between us had completely shifted. The warmth of the evening had been replaced with a heavy silence, filled with tension. I felt torn between wanting to support her and the fear that this situation was going to test our relationship in ways I wasn't prepared for. I couldn't deny how admirable her determination was, but at the same time, I couldn't help but wonder, am I really wrong here? Or is it right for me to want to protect what we have? I thought about her words, about her fierce ambition and drive, and it was clear to me that she had worked too hard to get to this point. It wasn't about Andrea anymore. It was about her dreams, her future, and her refusal to let anything, including her past, hold her back. I wanted to respect that, but the question lingered. Was I asking too much, or was I just trying to protect something I feared losing? The more I thought about it, the more conflicted I became. I knew I couldn't control her career, and I didn't want to stand in the way of her success. But I couldn't ignore the uncomfortable feeling that this job, this new chapter, wasn't just about her future. It was also about her past, and my role in it. Was I being selfish for wanting to keep things simple and secure? Or was I simply trying to ensure that we didn't lose sight of what we had together? As Kiara went on about how she planned to tackle the new challenges ahead, I was still struggling with the weight of my own feelings. She seemed so sure, so confident in her decision, and part of me admired that. But the other part of me, the part that was afraid of being left behind, of not being enough, still questioned everything. By the end of the evening, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't hold on to my doubts forever. I needed to find a way to trust her more, to believe in her independence and her ability to balance both her past and her future. But I also needed to trust myself, trust that my feelings were valid, even if they made me uncomfortable. In the quiet that followed her final words, I realized that our relationship was facing a pivotal moment. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that the only way forward was through open communication and a willingness to support each other no matter how complicated things might get. And so the question still lingered in the back of my mind. Am I wrong for feeling this way? Or am I simply trying to protect something that matters deeply to me? After that conversation, Kiara closed off. Her responses to my questions were short, and the light moments between us seemed to evaporate. I knew I had hurt her, but I couldn't ignore the growing discomfort that tormented me. I often found myself replaying her words, her smile that seemed to minimize everything, and the way she quickly brushed off my concerns. My jealousy mixed with a growing sense of guilt. Was I overreacting? Or was my instinct trying to protect me from something I didn't want to see? I couldn't let it go. Eventually, I decided to do something I probably shouldn't have. I asked Luca, a mutual friend, if he knew anything about Andrea. I wasn't proud of this move, but I needed answers. When I mentioned the situation, he looked at me with a strange, almost hesitant expression, as if he wasn't sure how to respond. Then he dropped what felt like a bombshell. He told me that Kiara and Andrea were still in touch. Those words hit me like a punch. I couldn't believe it. He explained that he knew about some messages between them and that Kiara had confided in him that she had stayed on good terms with Andrea after the breakup. For Luca, it wasn't a big deal. He told me it was natural to want to keep a civil relationship with an ex, especially if there were no hard feelings. But for me, knowing that they were still texting was devastating. My mind started racing, imagining scenarios I didn't want to see. That evening, when Kiara came home, I couldn't hold back my unease. I confronted her directly, asking if it was true that she still talked to Andrea. She hesitated for a moment, and in that instant I felt like time stood still. Then she admitted that yes, there had been some messages, but they were always completely innocent. She hadn't told me about them because she knew I would react badly. Hearing those words made me feel betrayed. It wasn't just about the job. There was an entire level of communication between them that I didn't know about. Even though she reassured me that it was nothing important, the fact that she had hidden those messages felt like a lack of transparency. I found myself overwhelmed by conflicting emotions, anger, jealousy, but also a deep sadness. I told her, with a heavy heart, that I couldn't accept this situation. For me, the issue was simple. She couldn't continue working with Andrea, nor could she keep that contact. I explained that if she really wanted our relationship to work, she would have to choose between me and that job. But as I said those words, I realized how heavy they were. Was I willing to put her in such a difficult position? Or was I just letting my insecurities take over? Kiara didn't respond right away. She looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and pain, and then she left the room without saying a word. Left alone, I wondered if I had just made an irreparable mistake. Kiara remained silent for what seemed like an eternity. Her eyes were fixed on mine, yet her gaze felt distant, as though she was searching for the right words in a sea of conflicting emotions. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, but laden with a sorrow I had never perceived before. She told me that what made everything so difficult for her wasn't just my request, but the very reason Andrea had remained a part of her life. It wasn't something she had sought or wanted, but something that had happened when I wasn't around, when she found herself in a situation I had never known. She began to tell me about a dark period in her life, a time when her mother had been gravely ill. It was a time when everything she thought she knew seemed to fall apart, leaving her to bear the weight of pain and fear all on her own. And during that time, unexpectedly, Andrea had been there for her. Not as an ex trying to rekindle something, but as a friend, someone who became a shoulder to cry on. He had done it without any ulterior motives, purely to offer support, and she had appreciated that. I had never known any of this. For her, that connection had never been a threat to our relationship, but for me, it had felt like one. Her words hit me like a punch. I felt the crushing weight of my own insecurity as it dawned on me that I had only seen one side of the story, the one that fueled my fears. I had never stopped to consider the full picture, never thought that perhaps not everything was about me. I had convinced myself that their relationship was a threat, without ever asking her what it truly meant to her. And now, after hearing all of this, I didn't know how to respond. Her speech didn't end there. She went on to say that she had already chosen me every single day. Every important decision, every step forward in her life, had been made with the two of us in mind. There had never been any doubt in her mind about who her future was with, but now I was the one questioning it, asking her to make a choice she had already made a long time ago. I felt a tight knot form in my chest, a mixture of shame and regret that left me speechless. Kiara stood up and slowly walked to the window. She gazed outside, her eyes seeming lost in deep thought. Perhaps she was trying to figure out whether it was worth fighting for a relationship that now felt more fragile than ever. I remained seated, unable to utter a word. Inside me, a tumult of emotions churned. The realization that I had hurt her, the regret for letting my fears take over, and the fear that I had pushed the woman I loved too far away. When I finally found the strength to speak, I realized that words would never be enough to fix what I had broken. I wondered if I had been too selfish, if I had underestimated her love for me and overestimated my right to impose conditions. And as Kiara remained silent, that question kept hammering in my mind. Was it really right to ask someone to give up a piece of their past just because I couldn't handle my own insecurities? I had asked her to choose between something I couldn't even fully comprehend and the life we were trying to build together, and now I had to live with the weight of that request. Had I overstepped? Had I broken something that, once shattered, couldn't be repaired? The silence between us seemed to echo louder than any words could, and in that quiet space I realized just how much I still had to learn about love, trust, and letting go of the things that weren't mine to control. Now that the situation has calmed down and I've had time to reflect, I can see things much more clearly. I've come to realize that my reaction to everything was not only excessive but also unfair to Kiara. In the moment, I was too caught up in my own fears and insecurities to see the bigger picture. I didn't truly consider the context Kiara was in, nor did I take the time to appreciate what this opportunity really meant for her. The job she had secured wasn't just any job. It was her dream job. The position she had been working toward for years, sacrificing so much to get there. This was her moment to finally achieve something she had been striving for, something she deserved. And instead of being fully supportive, I let my own emotions get in the way. I allowed my fear of her past, of Andrea, her ex, overshadow what should have been a time of celebration for her. When we finally sat down and talked about everything, it became clear that this wasn't about me or Andrea at all. It was about her career, her ambitions, and her right to chase after her dreams without feeling like she needed to ask for permission or approval. I realized that Chiara has chosen me every single day of our relationship. She's been clear about her commitment to me, her love for me. That should have been enough, but I let my insecurities blur that truth. It's not easy to admit, but I had to confront the fact that trust is something I've struggled with. Trust is fundamental in any relationship, and without it, there's no real foundation to build on. Looking back, I see that my attempts to protect what I thought was mine were really just my insecurities trying to take control. Andrea wasn't a threat. He was a shadow I created out of my own doubts. The real danger wasn't him. It was my inability to trust Chiara fully and let go of my fears. After some deep reflection, I made the choice to take a step back and let go of the need to control. It wasn't easy, it never is, but I realized that my behavior was hurting the very thing I was trying to protect. I was putting unnecessary strain on our relationship, questioning something solid and beautiful over a past that was long gone. Chiara's ex is a part of her history, but he doesn't define her present, and he doesn't define our relationship. The only person giving him power in this situation was me, and that had to stop. So I decided to support her in this new chapter of her life. I realized that love isn't about controlling someone else's choices. It's about standing by them as they grow and succeed. It's about celebrating their victories as if they're your own and being there to lift them up, not hold them back. I couldn't let my insecurities get in the way of her happiness and her success. If I couldn't trust her, then what did that say about us, about me? The truth is, if trust doesn't exist, there's no foundation to build a future on. This experience has taught me a lot. It's shown me that love isn't about possession or fear. It's about understanding, respect, and mutual support. It's about seeing your partner as a whole person, with dreams, aspirations, and a past, and accepting all of it. Chiara's success is something to be proud of, not something to fear. Looking back, I'm ashamed of how I reacted. I let my fears dictate my actions, and in doing so, I almost undermined the very trust and love that Chiara and I have built together. I'm grateful she was patient enough to help me see things differently, to show me that love isn't about control or ultimatums. Now I'm committed to being the person who lifts her up, who stands beside her as her biggest supporter. I want to be the partner she deserves, the one who encourages her to chase her dreams and never doubts her intentions. This is her time to shine, and I don't want to be the reason she dims her light. So after all of this, I ask myself, what would you have done in my place? Would you have let go of your insecurities and supported your partner in their dreams? Or would you have let your fears control you?